Croeso and welcome to our first Ysgol Rwabyn transition presentation. The last time we met was a year ago as you toured our school and others to make the important decision about which secondary school would suit your child. We're absolutely delighted that you have chosen our school, Ysgol Rwabyn, and we're looking forward to welcoming your child in Year 7. In the meantime, we are all adapting to a different world and a different way of working together. Last year, we could not have imagined that this meeting would have to be recorded and that we would not be able to meet face to face. Transition is always an important part of Ysgol Rwabyn and our planning through the academic year. And this year, we will make sure that we take extra time to reassure you and your child as they're working away from their well-known and well-loved primary school and as they prepare for life in Ysgol Rwabyn. The purpose of this presentation is to reassure your child and you as a family as you prepare for this important step up to secondary school. If I was meeting you in normal circumstances, some of these purposes would not be explained in as much detail, but I want to make sure today that myself and Mrs. Wright-Davis later in the presentation reassure you and your child as much as we can that actually there will be extra things happening that make the Year 7 start an exciting one. So first of all, we want to make sure that we are welcoming you to our school. This transition should be seamless. We work very closely with our 5 feeder primary schools and we'll make sure that we continue to do that with some of you who are travelling further afield to join our school. I want to make sure that I introduce key staff to you, people who will be important as we work through the following weeks and months leading up to September. I also want to make sure that we've explained Ysgol Rwabyn transition arrangements, particularly this year in 2020, where we are adapting them in exciting and interesting new ways. Many of you will already know about SWAN, our speaking, writing and numeracy project at the start of Year 7, and that eases transition from primary to secondary, and I will talk about that a little bit later on. I want to make sure as well that given we are working at a distance from each other at the moment, that you're able to find our transition information easily and that you also have a way of contacting us if you remain concerned about anything or if you just want to make contact with some of the key staff I mentioned to help you and your particular family circumstances. It will also be important during this time that you've got a way of asking questions and having answers leading up to September through regular communications with us. All of this will be explained during the presentation. I'm going to start by actually introducing you to some of the key members of staff who you may already know because they will, in many instances, have visited the primary schools or when your child has come up to Ysgol Rwabyn through a variety of experiences they have already had, you will have met these key people. First of all, myself as head teacher, Mrs. Ferran Evans. And then also on the senior leadership team, we have our assistant head teacher, Mr. Foreman, who many of our Year 6 students and Year 5 students already know. And taking part in this presentation, Mrs. Wright-Davis, who is a very important person in the lives of our Year 6 and 7 students. And she is the pastoral lead, the lead learner for Year 7. And all our youngsters, when they start in September, get to know her and Mr. Foreman extremely well. And also, for you as a family, introducing you to Mrs. Navarro, our additional learning needs coordinator, who will be making phone calls to some of you and your families to make sure that we're putting the right provision in place when your children start with us in September. And this year, in 2020, we have an addition to our key staff. We know that while our young people in primary and secondary school are working in the main from home, that they need their spirits and their mood lifted with messages from school and some fun and cheerful things that actually make them smile when they can be a little bit worried and are working outside of their routine. So just a few weeks ago, we introduced a new member to Ysgol Rwabyn family, someone who, if I can say someone who is going to add to our transition and to be a way of giving some of our youngsters key messages about school. So as you will see on the PowerPoint, we have a very important school mascot, and his name is Maverick. And Maverick's going to serve as a shining example of how to wear school uniform, as you can see in the photograph. In fact, now I'm told that Charlotte, who works in school, actually has quite a lot of difficulty getting him to take his tie off at night time. He also is taking a full and active part in lockdown and distance learning. So you can see in the montage of photographs that Maverick is taking daily exercise with Joe Wicks very, very seriously, but also his studies. Through the accelerated reader programme, Charlotte has already introduced him to Harry Potter and other materials that are stretching and challenging him. At the end of a really long day of distance learning, Maverick, as you can see in the far photograph, is actually quite keen on some social networking and also the remote there that you can see after being on his Xbox. Maverick is going to be used throughout the next year as a cheerful reminder to our students, especially some of our younger ones, about how life in school is not just about work and doing well in that way, but also about our well-being and keeping everybody cheerful and having communications done in a way that makes us all smile and be clear about what we're doing. At this point, I'm going to hand over to our lead learner for Year 7 and 6. I'm extremely proud of all the work that she and Mr. Foreman do alongside all the other staff in school to ensure that our primary schools know us really, really well and that she is already heavily involved in the lives of many of our children before they start in secondary school. She's going to talk to you for a short while about the transition and the induction activities that have already taken place for many of our students before they ever reach Year 7 in Ysgol Rwabyn.
As Mrs Vernon-Evans said, I'm Mrs Wright-Davis and I am currently the lead learner for Year 7 at Ysgol Rwabyn, and part of my role is Year 6 transition. So throughout the last 12 months, I have been going into the local feeder schools, visiting lessons, observing how the children learn, watching Christmas concerts, judging some of the schools I Steddfords, whilst also supporting Mr Foreman in school with the transition activities that we've put on here. Some of the examples you can see behind me have been PE lessons where they've been doing trampolining, design and technology and science where they've been making rockets, and myself I have delivered some history lessons where some of the students have taken part in World War I trenches or medieval baking. Also as part of our transition, our 560 officer organised a session for them last year when they were in Year 5, taking part on the field in a massive sports session. For those of you who might be a bit more worried because you're not part of our cluster, don't worry about that. We'll be putting extra support in place for you, for those of you that are maybe a bit unsure of the school and don't really know us as well as our cluster schools do. So please don't be afraid to get in touch if you have any concerns at all.
One of the challenges for us in this school, and I'm sure across the country, is how to communicate with the students who already belong to us, and perhaps at this stage and in this last half term, the actual students who will be new and will be coming into us, how we communicate with our youngsters and our families. To make that as easy as we can for you until your data is pulled through into our school systems, we're going to suggest 2 ways to keep in touch with Ysgol Rwabyn and to check some of the information that we keep sending out to you linked to transition. The first, as you'll see in the presentation, is through our website. When you log on to the Ysgol Rwabyn website, which is probably really a useful resource anyway, but what we have done is we've added transition into the tabs at the top, and we will be putting all our information and letters and so on in there so that you're not having to navigate through the web page to other places. So that is one very useful way that you can keep in touch with us over the weeks leading up to September and probably beyond as we move through that first term as your youngsters are getting used to being in Ysgol Rwabyn. The second thing I would encourage you to do is to, through the App Store, download the Ysgol Rwabyn app, because as we move forward, many of our parents already use that, and it's a very good way of being alerted to the latest news out there and cheerful news stories and things that are occurring through our social network platforms that allow you to keep in touch with school. I'm aware that we're giving you lots of information in this presentation, so I want to reassure you that there will be an information one later on in June. So I'm just going to do a very quick summary of the transition activities that will happen between now and October for your child. Obviously, we've had to adapt our transition activities, and so in the first instance, we will be in regular contact with our primary colleagues to make sure we're gathering information about each child. And our more formal transition days will be moved to an appropriate time where we look after your children when they come into us in September. We're also going to provide some short workshops online to support parents with information about homework, uniform, school expectations and so on, and anything you highlight to us that you would like extra information on. In addition, you'll see many points listed in the presentation. We've had to think of some extra activities to engage our youngsters while they're working away from both primary and secondary school. So you will see from the presentation that we have a video planned for Year 6 students in the next couple of weeks, so please look out for that. And we will be sending out a transition booklet with activities and tips and letters from our current Year 7 students. And also, and I'm excited to wait for this, Mr. Wright-Davies, an example lesson from Ysgol Rwabyn, which Mr. Wright-Davies will be loading again into our webpage. Following on from that, I've mentioned our introduction to life in secondary school in the first 2 weeks when your child joins us through the SWAN project. I'm not going to talk at length about that now. That will come up when we do our information evening later on in the year. But you will see from the slides that when our children join us, they're involved in a number of exciting activities, remaining in their base to mirror what they're used to in primary school. So we have all sorts of things, as you can see from the picture. Victorian lessons as we consider what education was like in the past compared to now. We have different ways of writing and presenting work, and we have right at the end, after all these activities and the 2 weeks, a special celebration event where in the past we've asked our parents to come in and each child is presented with a certificate which marks their first big achievement and success when they're only just 2 weeks in to life in Ysgol Rwabyn. I'm now going to hand over to Mrs. Wright-Davies, who will talk you through some of the ways Year 7 have prepared our current Year 6s for life in Ysgol Rwabyn.
We understand that this is a really big change for your child and yourselves in normal circumstances, but now all the usual worries and anxieties are heightened in these difficult times. Some of you may have some of the concerns that are listed behind me. So to try and help alleviate those fears, we will be on hand to answer any of these questions throughout the transition period. I'm sure you would prefer to know the thoughts and opinions of the students that attend Ysgol Rwabyn than maybe myself, which again you can see on the presentation behind me. These were taken from what the Year 7 thought of the transition period from June right through to the end of SWAN after their induction in September. And also you'll be able to see that there's some information and thoughts on the parents' side of it as well. Now, moving on, as part of our work this half term, we've been working on Google Classrooms, and I've set the Year 7 students a little bit of a challenge, and that is of coming up with some helpful tips, hints and advice to help support the current Year 6 students during the transition process. I had an overwhelming response to these, with students offering excellent advice, tips and support. Examples of these are included in the presentation behind me. All of the rest of the responses are going to be collated and will be available on the school website for you to see and read, because it's much better to hear it from their mouths and what they think will help you, because it might be things that we haven't thought of in as much detail. For any questions that you have, please, please, please do not hesitate to contact myself, Mrs. Ferren-Evans or Mr. Foreman through the school website, and we will be able to answer any of these concerns that you have got. Hopefully the transition booklet that you'll be getting in the post will help alleviate some of those stresses or worries. But as I say, we are here to answer any questions you have, and I really, really, really am looking forward to meeting you, whether that be in the summer term, if the government guidelines say so, or if not, in September. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr, and thank you very much for listening to our first video on Ysgol Rwabyn transition. And I know you would like me, on behalf of yourselves, to thank all the staff and support staff in Ysgol Rwabyn, and a particular thanks to the work of Miss Wright-Davies and Mr. Foreman for their tireless support of our primary schools and younger students throughout the year. We are so excited about waiting to fill this school again, as it should be, with our youngsters, and in particular to welcome your child to us as one of our latest and newest members of the Ysgol Rwabyn family. Thank you.